menonton via mobile. Di kota besar penggunaan pemancar FM untuk penyaluran radio dari konser atau film sehingga dapat tetap menjaga physical distancing. Penggunaan pemancar FM ini tentunya memerlukan izin penggunaan spektrum frekuensi radio dan penggunaannya di kota besar terbukti menimbulkan interferensi baik radio siaran terhadap radio siaran yang telah ada serta berpotensi menimbulkan interferensi ke navigasi penerbangan. Untuk itu perlu suatu terobosan untuk menangani bentuk penggunaan seperti ini. Selain itu mengingat banyak keterbatasan yang terjadi di teknologi analog, ditambah adanya peningkatan kebutuhan kanal radio siaran, kita perlu mencari solusi dengan teknologi digital, terutama bagi wilayah yang belum terjangkau infrastruktur broadband maupun masyarakat yang memiliki keterbatasan finansial untuk layanan broadband. Presiden Republik Indonesia telah menginstruksikan transformasi digital di semua sektor, termasuk industri penyiaran. Instruksi ini terkait pula dengan penyiaran televisi maupun penyiaran radio. Undang-Undang Nomor 11 Tahun 2020 tentang Cipta Kerja yang baru saja ditandatangani oleh Bapak Presiden telah mengamanatkan bahwa transformasi di bidang penyiaran ini harus berlanjut dan terus dipersiapkan dengan baik. Teknologi digital itu sendiri membuka banyak manfaat dan peluang. Di antaranya hemat energi untuk jangkauan siaran yang serupa, sehingga dapat mengurangi biaya OPEX atau operational expenditure. Menggunakan bandwidth lebih sedikit untuk kapasitas lebih banyak dengan kualitas yang lebih baik. Mampu membantu diseminasi informasi melalui cara yang lebih komprehensif, mencakup tidak hanya suara, tapi juga dilengkapi data berupa teks yang dapat membantu di era pandemik maupun ke era pembelajaran jarak jauh seperti sekarang. Juga teknologi digital diyakini mampu menerapkan multi pemancar untuk menjangkau populasi yang lebih banyak. Peluang bisnis baru dan peningkatan bisnis juga ditimbulkan karena kita memasuki era digital ini. Untuk menggapai potensi penuh dari momentum transformasi digital di era pandemi, isu-isu ini perlu dipertimbangkan dengan baik. Untuk itu kami sampaikan selamat datang di kesempatan yang berharga ini, di mana kita akan mengeksplorasi penyiaran radio digital terestrial. Sebelumnya kita tidak memiliki banyak kesempatan untuk membicarakan radio digital terestrial, dan oleh karenanya saya berharap acara webinar ini dapat memberikan manfaat yang maksimal, terutama diantaranya terkait dengan pengenalan teknologi radio digital terestrial yang telah direkomendasikan ITU, yaitu Digital Radio Mondial (DRM), dan memberikan gambaran kepada industri untuk mengenali teknologi ini dan juga mempersiapkan transformasi digital. Untuk itu, pada acara ini diundang para pemangku kepentingan, meliputi lembaga penyiaran publik, lembaga penyiaran swasta, lembaga penyiaran komunitas, perusahaan manufaktur, dan publik lainnya. Meskipun agenda utama di webinar ini terkait dengan PJJ, penyiaran komunitas, iklan dan informasi publik, dan peluang bisnis, peserta webinar dipersilahkan untuk mengajukan pertanyaan apapun yang relevan dengan teknologi DRM ini untuk menjamin pemahaman yang lebih utuh. Mengingat teknologi digital memerlukan kesiapan ekosistem tentu menjadi tantangan tersendiri. Semoga ekosistem tersebut dapat tersedia dengan harga yang terjangkau. Pada webinar ini kemungkinan akan dijelaskan bandingan adopsi teknologi digital dengan negara lain. Saya sampaikan terima kasih kepada semua pihak peserta DRM Konsorsium yang telah menyiapkan acara ini. Saya harap setelah acara ini Bapak Ibu sekalian mengetahui kebijakan transformasi digital dan juga menjadi pemahaman untuk memahami teknologi digital yang lebih baik di sektor radio atau siaran radio. Akhir kata saya ucapkan selamat sekali lagi mengikuti acara webinar ini dengan baik dan semoga bermanfaat buat kita semua. Saya ucapkan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Baik, terima kasih pada Pak Dirjen yang sudah membuka. Selanjutnya akan dimulai sesi paparan dari Drm Consortium. So I would like to return the floor to Drm Consortium to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Terima kasih, Pak Beni. Terhormat Pak Ismail, Acting Secretary General Kominfo dan Director General, seluruh peserta dari Kominfo, pemerintah daerah, penyiar radio komunitas, radio amatir, telekom, BMKG, perguruan tinggi, produsen dan ahli-ahli lainnya, selamat sore dan selamat datang. Thank you very much for joining us today. It is most appreciated. Let us start the proceedings now, and we will start by making some presentations, and then after that, the presentations we have enough time for question and answer, and we can ask at that time to ask you questions. I suggest that please mute your microphones during the presentations and keep your questions ready. At the end of the presentations, we will be happy to answer any of the presentations. So thank you for joining us, and we start our presentation now. I will start by providing a short overview of what we are going to say today. The subject has already been introduced, the Drm digital radio in FM. So this is about digitizing the FM band by using the digital radio. As you know, Kominfo has hosted this webinar, and the Drm Consortium and Fraunhofer IIS has very kindly organized it on behalf of everybody here. Alex, the control is not working. Okay, thank you. We have already introduced the speakers partly, but I'll be introducing them in due course. We are very happy to have this special webinar workshop just exclusively pointed and made for Indonesia. And we do believe that Indonesia is poised to take advantage of this wonderful technology and wonderful services that come out of Drm digital radio, particularly in the FM band. Briefly, the presenters here this afternoon are Ruxandra Obreja, who is the chair of the Drm Consortium, and she has joined us from London, early morning in London. Alex Zink is very well known, otherwise as well, in Indonesia. He's the vice chair, Drm Consortium, senior business development manager of Fraunhofer IIS, located in Erlangen in Germany. Bernd Linz, senior business development manager, Fraunhofer IIS, again in Erlangen, Germany, and I'm your first speaker today. Currently speaking, of course, from India, although I am based in Malaysia. So now let's go to the subject and say, how healthy is the FM radio industry in Indonesia today? And this slide is actually based on my conversation with a lot of FM broadcasters in Indonesia, including those from Presni and others. We do acknowledge that FM radio industry has had a very good revenue model. And when I say has had a good revenue model, means it may not look so good now, because the FM capacity is now very overused in many cities. And at the same time, more and more radio broadcasters are looking to get FM channels because they think that they have to say something. But the additional spectrum is not available at all. In addition, that although Indonesia is a vast country, you are not able to use highway radio in the analog setup because it's very, very expensive. For FM radio, the operational costs are becoming very high as compared to the revenue. So does it really mean that the FM radio industry is facing the sunset? And as many of my friends in Indonesia would certainly subscribe to that. So what is the relevance of DRM FM digital radio in Indonesia? See, the DRM FM digital radio system will be described in more detail by other speakers, but I would like to say that it offers 3 radio channels, stereo channels plus multimedia, as against 1 channel and no substantial multimedia by FM analog. And the high quality radio is appreciated everywhere because it is the digital quality. And all this without any new spectrum. So what it actually does is the system saves about 90% of the transmit power of the analog signal. It uses only 10%. And it does not disturb the FM radio which is existing right now in any way. So when we say that it does not need any new spectrum, it means that the current dispensation where analog FM carriers are available, the digital DRM slot is inserted between 2 carriers like this, in this case adjacent to the FM channel. And this really uses the white space between the existing FM carriers. So it does not really need any new spectrum. Its slot is only 96 kilohertz wide, and we always operate in the simulcast mode. That is, the analog FM is operating together with the digital signals. So among the outstanding benefits of DRM FM are, of course, this flexibility of locating it in the spectrum. It can be located in various ways and various places. We have multiple radio channels in 1 slot. We have a very superior mobile and indoor reception. The analog signal right now is very suspect in indoors. The indoor reception is pretty bad, especially in big cities. And mobile depends on the street to street. So digital radio overcomes that problem in 1 shot. And most importantly, by using digital radio, you have a very efficient method of using highway radio for large countries like Indonesia and others. So you have big savings in service as well as in operating costs. So these are some of the main benefits of using digital radio in FM band, DRM digital radio in FM band. Now we have been talking about multimedia experience, and digital radio, DRM digital radio provides this experience, and this is an actual example of the RRE station in Banten, in the Banten province, which is putting out what is called Journal Line multimedia. Journal Line is a multimedia service which provides text, which provides interactive text, which provides also graphics to help and to augment the audio service. In this case, this is provided by RRE, and it provides us the latest news. And as you can see, the second panel in the center, it goes into more details, and the panel on the right goes into more details. So this multimedia experience will be, of course, described in more detail. All I wanted to tell you is that it's not only radio, but it's also Radio Plus. Let me come to the excellent evaluation and testing work carried out by Kominfo in the month of August, for which a formal report has now been published. And these tests were on the DRM FM transmitter in Sukabumi, in Pelogran Ratu. And I have just copied all these slides, the 3 or 4 slides from this report. Now, the first one is it shows various details of coverage, of evaluation, of interference at various test points in Pelabuhan Ratu in Sukabumi province. And if I can expand one of them in the next slide, this is the one that shows the various parameters. For example, in the first line there, you can see the FM coverage and the Drm coverage, and you can compare the power. 1000 watts, 1 kilowatt, and the Drm coverage is almost as good, if not better, by 50 watts with a very good field strength. And at this field strength, which is 15 dB lower than FM field strength, still the audio quality is very good. And if you go to the second one, which is an interference calculation or evaluation, you can see that even at with 100 watts power, the DRM digital radio is quite good. And in the last one, in the interference evaluation on simulcast, where both FM and DRM is working, the results are excellent. So this evaluation taken up by Kominfo really provides us a snapshot of what is really happening with the DRM and FM in the simulcast mode. And in the next slide, we have the conclusions of Kominfo. As you can see on the right side, there are two DRM carriers side to side. And this shows the simulcast of FM DRM, DRM together. And I will explain these two blocks by expanding them in the next slide. Here, so this is a copy and paste of the previous slide, and it says, as per conclusions of the Kominfo, that there is no harmful interference within the simulcast of FM and DRM. And although the power is 1 to 10, both FM and DRM audio are received very well. And it concludes that it is possible to run these transmitters, these two services by the same broadcaster under certain conditions. And the second one is that no harmful interference occurs within the DRM simulcast or DRM together, and the audio is received is very good, and there is no issue on adjacent channel interference. And this scheme is possible and is most suitable for low power transmission such as community broadcasting. So these are some very powerful and definitive endorsements of Kominfo evaluation on the DRM system and its suitability for FM broadcasting, for the commercial broadcasting, for the public broadcasting, and for community radio broadcasting in Indonesia. And these are summarized in the last slide, that the conclusions is simulcast analog FM and DRM transmissions are possible and well done. There is no interference to nearby FM stations. There is better quality audio with DRM, more services, 3 times more, large coverage area in the DRM mode. And of course, what is also very important for Indonesia, that the emergency warning functionality is possible and can be delivered by the system. So I will leave you at this stage and I'll join at a later stage. And now I think Ruxandra Obreja is going to address you to give an overview of DRM and what it does. So Ruxandra, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Sharad. That was very powerful. And I will just remind some of you or tell you, if you haven't heard before, a few things about the DRM in a more general context. Yeah, that's me. So DRM, Digital Radio Mondial, mondial meaning global or worldwide, is an ITU standard that covers all bands, AM and FM. which is very powerful, is the only standard. And it is the successor standard, so it is the new version, modern version for analog AM and FM. It is not controlled by a single company, and no licenses are required. The DRM consortium does not control any licenses. We are not for profit. And as Sharad was mentioning right at the beginning, remember, in AM or FM, DRM offers up to 3 audio services, 3 channels, 3 programs, call them what you want, and multimedia. And you will hear a lot about multimedia. So that's a very big advantage. It can be used in digital or in simulcast, as you saw in the excellent report done by Kominfo. And DRM can be used to upgrade what stations have already, as long as the hardware is not too old. It is not a multiplex solution, and the broadcaster remains in full control of their transmission and of their content. So they don't go to another middleman, don't have to pay extra, and don't have to share with other broadcasters in this way. And we think that for the Indonesian radio industry, which is very active, very interesting at the moment, it is the most practical solution for development of what might look in the digital context as a fairly static radio industry. So that's good for you, in other words. Yes. I said digital radio mondial or global digital radio can be used for all bands, and this is just an illustration. It just shows that it can do the bands above 30 megahertz and below 30 megahertz. Yes, and if you look at the representation, you will see there all the AM bands from long wave to short wave, and the VHF bands 1, 2, and 3. You will see that DAB is on band 3, whereas DRM can be in band 1, 2, and 3. The most important thing to remember is that the digital radio mondial, no matter which bandwidth, has the same advantages. And let's go back to these advantages. It gives much more than audio. More information without the internet, radio schooling, so important now in COVID times, and the receiver can be used like the old tape recorder. It can cache information, which you can then use at any time. DRM is in cars already, over 2.5 million cars, or around this figure, in India, and you will see about this. And it has this data possibility, which you know from your mobile phones. Young people want to have data, and Digital Radio Mondial offers it. And more than that, it offers relevant information to people wherever they are. This is terrestrial broadcasting. No copper wires, no satellites. Everywhere, anywhere, you can get information through DRM. So, what are you going to hear today? I mean, you had an introduction. Thank you very much, Mr. Ismail. You had an excellent introduction from Sharad. But we want to take you through a whole journey. So please stay with us. Keep your videos off. You will get the presentation in PDF, so you can look at it and translate it in Bahasa if you want to. But you are going to hear about the coverage, which is important, about the audio and data services, which I mentioned, about the fact that no new spectrum is required, and spectrum is a great, great asset for you, for Kominfo, for the country. And also we are going to talk money. Who doesn't want to talk money? So it's about lower operation costs, but also capital costs, how much you need to invest. It is also green, which is very important. And we again think it is a most practical solution for Indonesian radio broadcasters, for community radio stations, and you'll see how. So this is what we are going to talk about. Okay? Now, I mentioned that we are a consortium, and what this means, we are a group of companies, big and small, some of the names you will know, that are promoting this standard, DRM. We do not hold licenses, we do not make any money, and this is for a not-for-profit organization, which any of you can join. So you see there, RRI is a member. You see Fraunhofer, present here, is a member. You see names you are aware of, Voice of America, Cambridge Consultants, NXP, and we want to have your name there. Okay? So I have been asked to give you a little view of DRM in the world. I mean, I could talk for hours, but you would get very bored. So I'm just going to mention the key countries for DRM. As you can see, they are big countries, and a lot of them are in the Asia-Pacific region. The number one market or country, if you want, for us is India. But it followed immediately by very active countries like Indonesia, Pakistan, China, Russia, and so on. So let's go to India first. India is the largest digital radio rollout in the world. It has currently 35 medium wave transmitters and is acquiring another 6 medium wave. And when I say medium wave transmitters, they are all DRM. They are covering 600, going towards 800 million people, and they are considering local coverage. But I must say, Indonesia on local coverage, FM rollout, you are ahead of India. China has opted for shortwave. It offers DRM coverage in shortwave with 7 very powerful transmitters. We have Brazil, they are just installing a transmitter, and there is Pakistan, which has a full plan and fully costed plan for doing it. Okay, Indonesia, we'll see about that. Russia is doing currently FM, DRM trial demonstration in St. Petersburg, and South Africa has also adopted a policy recommending both DRM and DAB. There are other countries in the world, apart from these key countries, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, South Africa. I won't go through all of them. You will see there where they are and what they have done. You will also see countries in other continents. You will see Germany, Hungary, United States, United Kingdom. So there are services, and the schedules of DRM services is on our website, drm.org. Please go to the site. Okay. Yeah. So let's go back to India. This is just to give you a bit of a sense of where the transmitters are. So with shortwave and medium wave, they have 38, but another 6, I said, are on their way. They have invested about more than more than $250 million in this, and they put roughly that amount of power in the air every day to keep these transmitters on air. Some of them are in transmitting in simulcast, but they are increasing the pure digital signal with different content. It's only different content that will make people buy receivers. Okay. I mentioned Pakistan and their plan. They have a 5-year plan, and they want to do shortwave, medium wave, and FM. And you see here some of the places and the coverage. They have already started about installing a medium wave, a big medium wave transmitter. The plan has been approved, but as usual, COVID slows a little bit the things, and it is just a matter of releasing the money already approved by Imran Khan, the Prime Minister. Okay. South Africa, this is their communications minister, very active, Stellanda Beni Abrahams. They have looked hard at all the possibilities, and they are the first country to recommend DRM, but also DAB. The only problem they still have is that band 3, the only band for DAB, is not free yet because they haven't managed to digitize television. So objectively, at the moment, they can do DRM, but of course, they are looking at both standards. Yeah. As you know, we have been working together with our friends and partners in Indonesia and members of the Consortium for, and we had a very successful demonstration in 2017 in Batam. As you can see, the only thing I want to show here is the 2 triangles. Those are the FM stations which exist, and the very comfortable digital station between the 2 FM stations. And this was done in simulcast, and it was a very successful demo. Okay. Much more impressive, I think, is that this map, which shows the island, or anyway, it shows Batam and Batam city. We wanted to see what the coverage is. Green, obviously, is uninterrupted DRM coverage. Blue is the expected coverage, and the red dots, there are some, is where the coverage failed. But what is the conclusion of this is that the coverage was more than fulfilling our prediction. So if we are talking about DRM coverage with less power, less money, then be convinced that Batam showed how it can be done. Okay. The conclusions, again, after the tests in Batam, were that simulcast is possible. No interference is there, which is very important. We had mobile, car, and in the room reception. And as mentioned, the coverage area was large, was beyond or anyway, according to expectations, and a bit better as well. I will not go in great detail, but I just want to update you a little bit from our perspective about the fantastic project which was undertaken in June, July, August in Indonesia. And the first FM DRM transmission started in Banten in June. And then you have the other sites I mean, you know this map much better than me. And you will also see that there were more than one service, so more than one program. You had Journalline news service, which is like a newspaper news. EWF, which is emergency warning, disaster warning, so important. And you had simulcast, so you could maintain analog FM while doing digital, so you don't lose the FM listeners. I mentioned emergency warning functionality. We call it EWF. And this was tested in Jakarta in August. Excellent trial, excellent demonstration, and excellent results. Again, no interference and a very good functioning of this emergency warning functionality. You can go and read the whole report, and you will see how it is done, how you go from a normal program to disaster warning, how you go from entertainment to saving lives, and how you go back to your entertainment. So everything is done so that you take your listeners with you all the way. Okay, and here, please concentrate now. Look at on the left-hand side. So you have RRI Pro 3 at the bottom. Then you have Journalline, which is a text. And then you have the emergency channel. So you can insert, turn to the right-hand side now. You can insert your emergency channel in between a Lima and Journalline, which is the text, the newspaper equivalent. So that's where you insert it and where you can have emergency instead of channel Lima, or keep channel Lima if there is a part which doesn't need to hear the disaster warning. You don't want to get the whole Sumatra or the whole Java running to the hills if it's only one part. Okay, somebody asked if there is a difference between DRM and DAB, but let's concentrate on DRM and Indonesia. And we understand that Indonesia is examining feasibility of introducing digital radio in the FM band and also in medium wave, like India has done. But let's be realistic here. Let's be all honest. FM radio business is losing market share. We have to do something to save radio. Not only radio, radio has become audio, has become a new digital platform, and that's what DRM can offer you. So it can do it in band 2, the only DRM can do band 2, unlike DAB, but it can do band 3 as well. And why? Remember these key benefits. No new spectrum needed. You do not need to invent any band or find places here and there. You can use the band 2 that exists. Lower capital and operational costs, more channels, more capacity, and use as you grow. You do not have suddenly to have 3 channels when you have one single station. The 3 channels is more content, more people, more journalists, more electricity. Not in DRM, it's the same, but anyway, use as you grow, you have the capacity. You have the newspaper, the radio text feature, and also the emergency warning. If you remember this, you will find that DRM can satisfy you and can help you grow and can help you get listeners and money as well. Why not? And with this, I will pass you on to Alex, who will go in much more detail about the DRM for FM. Alex.
Thank you very much, Roxandra. So let's have a look at DRM in the FM band. It was already mentioned briefly before. The FM broadcasting today, both commercial, public, and also for community stations, is challenged all over the world. There is competition, major competition from other digital media for the user's attention. Some perceive FM radio as old style media. It has audio only services. It is still analog. That leads to declining revenue because advertisers are looking at where the buzz is and where the young audiences are. But there is often a public mandate to maintain the broadcast networks, for example, in cases of emergency. So it's not easy to just say, let's replace FM and broadcasting in general with IP. It doesn't give us that kind of safety net. On the pro side, and this is why FM radio, in my view, or radio in the FM band, has a very bright future. It is the leading media for in-car consumption particularly. It is also available in mobile phones and of course in desktop radios. One key difference to social media and web streams is that it's a trusted information source. If people hear something on the radio by their local broadcaster, be it the community station or the private station or the public broadcaster, that's a trusted information. Definitely much more trusted than what you receive daily over Twitter and Facebook. And for the broadcasters, the key benefit of FM broadcasting is, and this is why you really have to make sure you hold on to that asset, it is very limited competition. On the radio dial, you have maybe a dozen other stations in the bigger places. That's your competition. Once you're exclusively on the internet, your competition is millions of other stations. And I can guarantee there will always be some of these streams that have a better match with a particular listener. So the competitive situation is what makes FM broadcasting so super attractive for the broadcasters. And this is why we want to modernize it instead of replace it. Technically, the DRM transmission system in the FM band is not only for the FM band, it covers all the VHF bands for local services and regional services. That is band 1, band 2, the classic FM band, but also band 3, should it ever become available. You can deploy DRM there as well, being fully compatible with all the other VHF bands and with DRM in the AM bands. It is an ITU standard. Both the system description is ITU endorsed, but also the network planning parameters are available. How to use DRM alongside FM analog in the band 2, and how to use it alongside DAB+, where that's being used in band 3. It is an ETSI standard. All the technical specifications are published and freely available. You can just download them. The bandwidth it uses on air is just half or a third of what is used for analog FM at 96 kilohertz bandwidth. I understand that in Indonesia, an FM analog assignment is 300 kilohertz bandwidth, and that's for one service. In the 96 kilohertz, 1/3 of the capacity, we can transmit up to 3 audio programs plus all the data services. On a technical level, if you compare that with web streaming, you get a capacity between 37 and 186 kilobits per second out of that transmission. You can define it according to your requirements, whether you want to cover an easy area or whether it's a very demanding city with high-rise buildings. You can find the perfect trade-off between the transmission power, the capacity, and the coverage that you want to achieve by choosing the appropriate robustness level in DRM. All in all, and I will show you in a moment, it's green and very energy efficient if you compare it with analog in particular. And there is an easy transition path for established FM networks. So there's no need, when you want to introduce DRM in the FM band, to establish a whole new transmitter infrastructure. You can reuse most of what you already have today and migrate it over to DRM. Let's have a look at some of these aspects in more detail. I mentioned multiple services per transmission by digitizing the analog FM services to DRM. In the classical analog approach, you have the broadcaster, the program provider, that creates in the studio a program, has a distribution network to the transmitter side, and that distribution network has to carry the analog audio content, whether it's digital or analog, but it's the whole audio program that needs to be transmitted. The same with FM. As you can see, for the FM case, for local services, if you want to cover a certain region or a bigger city, and you need multiple transmitters to cover the area, in that case, you also need individual frequencies. In analog, the overlapping areas of these different transmissions, if they were on the same frequency, they would destroy the reception instead of being of any help. So you have to assign individual frequencies. And of course, that's an extra drain on the scarce asset of frequencies available. Once we migrate over to DRM, the system, the transmission chain looks similar, yet a bit different. We have up to 3 audio programs and all the data components that we can provide. That is contributed to in the local network to the content server. The DRM content server is the central component of the DRM transmission chain. It takes in all the audio, all the data, and encodes it for digital transmission. It adds all the signaling, and it creates the digital multiplex signal that is sent to the receivers. This small capacity multiplex signal is then sent over a standardized IP-based interface called MDI to all the transmitter sites. So instead of requiring dedicated high-capacity audio lines to each transmitter site, you only need a small bandwidth IP-based distribution channel. And you can even have backup channels, public internet, microwave links, satellite links, whatever is available for IP distribution. Once the signal reaches the different transmitter sites, it carries a timestamp information. That allows us to operate these transmitters in SFN mode, single frequency networking. So even if our transmitters have an overlapping coverage area, like 2 or 3 transmitters covering a major city, the signal, the digital signal will be, the reception of that signal will be improved in the overlapping areas instead of being destroyed. And all these transmitters therefore can work synchronously on the same transmission frequency, only occupying one frequency. We will talk about more of that in a bit later. We said that DRM transmissions are green and efficient. What does it mean in practical numbers? If you look at a 10 kilowatt, rather high power FM transmitter today, consuming 200 or 300 kilohertz of bandwidth for one single service, that gives you a certain coverage area. The same coverage area can be achieved with a digital transmission, thanks to the more robust encoding and the digital mechanisms behind it, with only 1 kilowatt of transmission power. So you can save up to 90% of your transmission power. And as a broadcaster, you know, particularly if you're operating transmitters in multiple places and for multiple programs, how easily that transmission power can stack up over the years. So saving 90% of that cost every year is quite significant. And within the 1 kilowatt transmission, again, we only occupy a third of the bandwidth, and that gives us the capacity for up to 3 audio programs plus data. No new frequency spectrum is required. What does that mean? Well, we heard already that DRM works in all the bands, all the radio broadcast bands. But focusing on the FM band, where today an analog FM license covers 300 kilohertz, DRM can easily be placed in between those existing analog transmissions. So as long as there are any gaps in the FM band where there's enough space for a 100 kilohertz signal, that's all we need. And the trials and the tests of Kominfo and others around the world have demonstrated again and again that there's no interference from these low power digital transmissions into the analog transmissions, or vice versa. Of course, assuming that the ITU planning parameters are fulfilled and properly applied. This is an example of how DRM can fit in the existing FM band. Wherever there's a gap, you can place the DRM signals and plan for the DRM signals. That, of course, is a task for the regulator. Just to let you know, in South Africa, in Johannesburg, we took a band scan of the FM band, and it was completely crowded. There was not a single space to add another FM signal anywhere. However, we found that there are 16 slots for a 100 kilohertz signal available. So that means in the absolutely crowded FM band in Johannesburg, in South Africa, there is still enough capacity to add up to 48 digital services. And that, of course, is a significant improvement there, which allows all the existing analog broadcasters to also participate and have a digital equivalent in the digital migration. When we look at the use of the bandwidth, the typical protection between two transmissions will be at least the same bandwidth as the analog signal, sometimes double the bandwidth. And the same is true for DRM. If you have DRM transmissions from independent transmitters, there should be a gap interval of 100 kilohertz between them, but it's only 100, not 300 minimum interval. In addition, if you have a chance to share the infrastructure, you can even have multiple of these DRM signals side by side without any gap in between if they are amplified with a single transmitter. So a very valuable asset is available here in terms of spectrum planning and frequency planning. I mentioned SFN, single frequency networking, before. SFN means that you broadcast the same content, the identical content. In fact, it has to originate from a single DRM content server in the headend, at the same time, synchronous, and on the same frequency. The advantage for the listener, if you have such a network, is that the reception overall, the reliability of covering a certain area is greatly improved compared with a classic approach where one single high power transmitter has to be set up in the city center. Whatever that covers is covered and everything else is bad luck. With this SFN approach, you can replace that for the future with lower power setups and have multiple transmitter sites, which overall save you money and still give a better coverage overall for your listeners. Or you could use it, as I've shown at the bottom, for gap fillers, even as long as you still have the single tower high power approach. And you have some area of the city, let's say covered by a hill, where FM reception today is not possible. In future, in digital, you can just add a small gap filler transmitter, very low power for that area. It operates on the same frequency, so you don't need new frequencies. And as a result, your listeners will have uninterrupted coverage throughout the whole city. An example is shown here. So you have a transmitter with high-rise buildings or with hilly terrain, which gives you shadowed areas where reception is not possible. By having a small power gap filler transmitter, you can cover the whole area perfectly for your listeners. On the same frequency, there's no switching in between. Another benefit is network gain. If one or part of your infrastructure breaks down, if you have a single tower only per big city, the whole city is without service if that breaks down. If you have multiple towers covering the city at lower power, and one of them breaks down, the large parts of the city will still have full service uninterrupted. Looking at financial benefits, that's an important aspect when we talk about migration to digital radio. What does it mean for the broadcasters? And of course, later on, what does it mean for the listeners that want to purchase a new digital capable radio set? Let's start in here with the broadcast situation, migration from analog FM to DRM FM. If you look at a typical FM site, there is the one-time purchase of equipment of of the land, of the housing. Let's assume you already have an FM site and we want to upgrade that particular site. So you need equipment. That's the one-time capital expense for the migration over to digital radio, CapEx. And then there are these operational expenses, OpEx, which include the whole signal distribution, the energy for your transmission, the cooling and rack space and maintenance and service, all of these aspects that you need to pay for. Over the lifetime of a typical transmitter, that can be multiple times the cost of the initial equipment purchase. So when you look at the overall affordability of a solution and the overall cost, you have to look at the CapEx cost in particular, and of course, the OpEx cost as a package. Giving some real numbers now. This is an example calculation done by Gates Air, the successor company of Harris. In this case, we're looking at a high power FM transmitter site, 10 kilowatt. And it's an old FM transmitter, so we have two options. Either we replace it with a new FM transmitter of 10 kilowatt, or we migrate over to DRM digital. That's the center column. If we compare those two, the left column and the center column with the numbers, the purchasing cost of the transmitter will be significantly lower for the digital version. It is not completely the equivalent of 1 kilowatt. You need a better model for digital, but it's still significantly less expensive than the analog equivalent for 10 kilowatts analog power. You need a smaller cooling system and surrounding components. Along with that, the installation cost is down. That gives us a total cost per site, comparing $50,000 to $24,000. In addition, of course, we must not forget there is the studio head-end, the DRM content server, that is exclusive to DRM transmissions. However, it's not included here in the calculation because one single content server can serve and run your whole nationwide network of FM transmitters, technically hundreds of transmitters. So it would be unfair to have it here as the transmitter cost. Just to remind you, there is this cost element that needs to be taken into account. But as you can see, even with the content server as a studio equipment included, the upgrade cost is already lower than what you would pay for the analog upgrade. And if you now divide by the number of services, because at the end of the day, you need to have the analog installation 3 times for 3 different programs, whereas all 3 programs can be covered by a single DRM transmission, the one-time investment for equipment comes down even more. In this particular example calculation, it is between $50,000 and $8,000, the cost difference. The numbers will look different once we approach your own vendor and manufacturer, but at least it gives you an idea of the magnitudes we are discussing. So already with the upgrade of equipment, if you look at this kind of calculation, you can save by switching over to digital instead of purchasing a new analog FM transmitter. But wait a bit, you said the majority of cost is in the operational expenses. So let's have a look at the operational expenses. By the way, this is how easy the upgrade of an analog FM transmitter to digital can be. In this case, the Gates Air transmitter, you just slide in this digital board and your analog FM transmitter is already ready. For the transmitter aspects, there is there could be or should be a DRM transmitter specification in Indonesia. I guess that's being discussed. The idea is that a DRM transmitter specification will give the required guidance for the manufacturers. It will show the commitment of the country, but it will also be helpful to all the broadcasters to know that if they purchase a certified transmitter certified for that country, it will fulfill all the minimum requirements in terms of functionality, quality, performance. So such a transmitter specification should address elements like which standard to be used, the tuning ranges that are expected, signal interference connectors, physical connectors, standardized connectors, all of that. So that at the end of the day, there could be a mechanism for type approval for transmitters by the different manufacturers. And then every broadcaster can trust that these approved transmitters fulfill all the legal requirements, but also the minimum functional requirements. So I said this was the one-time investment and the equipment. Now let's have a look at the operational expenses. For the same 10 kilowatt high power FM transmitter running at an efficiency of quite good 72%, that is a consumption of 14 kilowatt roughly, which means annual energy bill at a certain assumed cost per kilowatt hour. In this example here of $18,000 US. That is for one program. If you look at the DRM case, we have a much lower transmission power. And even though the efficiency of the transmitter is lower because it needs to operate in linear mode, not in saturation mode. So we have only an efficiency of, let's say, 50%. That is only 2 kilowatts of consumed energy compared with 14. So the cost is already much lower. And if we divide that by the number of up to 3 programs, then we are comparing $18,000 US to less than $1,000 US cost of transmission energy. And keep in mind that is for one transmitter. If you operate a network of dozens, maybe hundreds of transmitters all over the country, and if you do the calculation not just for 1 year, but for 10 years of operating this transmitter, these are huge amounts of money. And I will give you an example later on. And then we have the additional operational expenses, which will be reduced if you consider in the graphic down here, nine high power FM transmitters in a certain location, let's say a city with a shared antenna and combiner. These are 10 or 9 racks of equipment. They need a lot of cooling, of space, of redundancy spare parts, all of that. Those 9 high power analog FM transmitters could be replaced with only 3 much smaller digital ready FM transmitters. They give you exactly the same services on air, but in digital DRM. And as you can imagine from these lower power transmitters, the rack space is a fraction. The effort for cooling, for spare parts, maintenance, all of that becomes so much smaller. So there's cost saving all around if you look at the individual elements of a transmission component. Now, these are some general aspects of looking at cost savings when you migrate over to digital. But there's also the option for additional revenue opportunities. One thing that was already mentioned and that will be presented in more detail later on is the journal-line text application, the electronic newspaper or magazine service that we have in DRM, where you can reach the listeners without the need for internet. So all the content that you create as a broadcaster and make available on your website, with DRM, you can also transmit along with your transmission directly to the receiver set, and people don't need internet to access that information. Then we have the option with up to 3 channels per transmission if you are a smaller, let's say, commercial station. At the moment, you only have 1 program. What you could imagine for the future, how to use that capacity, you could consider temporary event or festival specific channels, pop-up stations, which create a buzz not only for FM in general, but for the event that you're advertising and for your transmissions. So these are considerations for additional revenue. But there's, looking back at the cost savings aspect that I mentioned, where you can save up to 90% of transmission power and maintenance and all of that. We did some test calculation, just to give you an idea, some demo calculation. Let's assume you have 3 nationwide FM programs. In this example country, that means 29 high power sites, 10 kilowatt analog FM transmitters each for 3 channels. And then we assume a certain US dollars per kilowatt hour cost. You can do the calculation with your proper values, of course. In analog, our transmission cost, just the energy to run your transmitters, is $1.2 million US a year. In digital FM, by the fact that you only need 10% or 20% of transmission power, and you can fold the 3 individual networks into 1 digital network, that is just over $100,000 US a year. So you have savings of over $1 million US a year just in your transmission cost, and by providing an even better service to your listeners. That's a win-win. And this is why we believe that migrating over to digital for all of today's analog FM broadcasters is a no-brainer. It makes sense on a service level for your listeners, it makes sense on a revenue level, and it makes sense on a business cost level. And with that, unfortunately, my colleague Bernd Linz is not with us today, so I will take over the part introducing the content aspects, the added value services of DRM. Looking at the content side, what listeners can experience and expect from DRM transmissions. There are, apart from the audio services, the classic audio services and the signaling, there are multimedia applications. And a handful of them are standardized. There are text messages. That's the little scrolling text that you see on the screen that accompanies an audio program. Typically, it will carry the currently playing artist and title of the song. So very program-related information. And the text messages should not update more often than every 20 seconds, roughly. That's a value indicated by the car industry to prevent distractions. Then we have the journal line application that was mentioned multiple times already. That's the advanced text application, where you can provide full text information in a structured way on different topics, from news to weather to sports updates to community news, all of that to the radio sets. And people don't need any internet connectivity for accessing that data while listening to your station. Slideshow is particularly relevant for local services, not so much for the AM bands due to capacity constraints. And here we can transmit images. Similar to text messages, they update automatically on the screen. So again, they should not be updated more often than every 20 seconds. Typical examples would be the album cover of a currently playing song. Then we have the EPG and SPI service program information, which in DRM is used and highly recommended to transmit the station logos. So your listeners will not only be able to select your station by its name and the label, but also by a graphical logo that goes with your station, if the receiver has a graphical screen, of course. It's very handy and very important, particularly for commercial stations, to be properly represented on the dial of the radio sets. And also, that means that in future, people don't have to memorize frequencies or bands. It doesn't matter if a DRM reception is available on large areas in medium wave or in the local service FM band. That's merely a question of network planning. But in terms of finding a service and continuously listening to a service, it's one common service list. And then there's TPEC and TMC for traffic updates, along with travel information through journal line that gives you a whole package for people on the road, being served greatly by these advanced DRM features. All in all, that shows us it's a great listener benefit, which makes it attractive using these applications for public broadcasters and everybody involved. And particularly for the commercial stations, these mean great revenue opportunities. Let's have a look at this journal line in a bit more detail, because we will later on see that this is also the foundation of many of the advanced applications of journal line. Just a second. Okay, here we go. Journal line is specifically designed for the DRM use case. It takes very low bitrate. So when you add a journal line service to your DRM transmission, it does not take away from the audio quality or the number of audio channels you can broadcast. It uses your existing data sources. As a broadcaster, you already provide a lot of information and very highly valuable information to your listeners, but on the internet, on your webpage, not on the radio set. And with journal line, you can bridge that gap, the media break. You can make all the information that you already create for your listeners on the internet also available on the radio sets, along with plenty of additional stuff there. It is designed for all types of consumer receivers, up to car receivers with text-to-speech output. Even the cheapest receivers can do journalline because the requirements in terms of hardware, memory, CPU, and so on are so small. All in all, it means that we have on-demand text information available in the radio sets, free to air, and no internet required. The type of information you would transmit as a broadcaster can be general information, news, sports updates, financial updates, airport departure times, and of course, if you're a commercial station's advertisement. But it can also be distance learning and remote education. We will see that later on. And there can be program-specific information, so background information to the currently ongoing shows, the forecast of your weekly schedule of programs, celebrity news of what is currently presented and playing in the music, the songs purchased during the last hour where people can, with a push of a button, purchase that particular song that was playing on the radio. And it's also used as the official standard for radio captioning in case you want to support subtitles for some radio shows. So all types of content, it is really up to the broadcaster what kind of content he wants to transmit using journalline, what is most relevant to his particular group of audiences and listeners. And of course, it depends on the type of program. A pop station will have a different content than a news station. This is an example of journalline in RRI. You have the journalline main service with all the different topics on the left, including the DRM radio news, as you can see at the bottom, and the contact information. And of course, there could be plenty of more information available here. If I select one of these items, I then see the news, in this case, of a particular category. And if I select the news on my receiver's screen, I can read the details of that news, just like an electronic newspaper would allow me to do. For advanced receivers, there is a hot button functionality where with a push of a button, I can link my listeners as a broadcaster to send emails, to send SMS, participate in polls, in interaction that I offer for my listeners with my station. Call-in numbers for a talk show, for example. People don't have to memorize a phone number being announced over the air to participate. They can look it up on the screen thanks to journalline. And if they have a connected device, let's say a mobile phone with DRM built in, they can push the button and make the phone call right away without ever writing down the phone number. It's also a very helpful feature for your advertisement partners because it can link information in journalline directly to an online offering that people can then access with the push of a button. I mentioned that it's not necessary to create exclusive content just for journalline because as a broadcaster, in most cases, you already have plenty of highly relevant information for your audiences. One example is using existing RSS feeds, the news feeds on the internet, which then are automatically converted by the DRM content server into journalline submenus. Revenue opportunities. We mentioned that journalline can be one key aspect of adding revenue to digital transmissions beyond what you could do in analog radio, where you had the audio track and all the advertisement was trying to get into people's ear and trying to make the message stick while they are listening to the radio set. With journalline, because it works with all classes of receivers, suddenly you have a channel to broadcast ads in a very low intrusive way, but in a very prominent way, which makes it attractive for the ad partners. Imagine you have certain types of information in your journalline offering that people often go to and look up quickly, like the local weather forecast, sports updates, and all of that. That could be sponsored information. The sports updates are presented to you by company XYZ. Service information, hotel, restaurant recommendation, music news, that can be provided and produced in cooperation with the relevant industries. And of course, there can be dedicated ad pages. We're giving you more details than the on-air ad announcement. So on air, the ad partner could mention a certain product or service and then refer to the journalline page for more information. And from the journal page, if the listener has a connected device, they could even jump further to the web page and other interactive elements, such as purchasing tickets or purchasing an order of that particular product. One highly important aspect when we talk about Journaline is that it bridges the gap between broadcast and IP streaming on the internet. The huge benefit of IP streaming on the internet is that you can effectively address each listener individually, as long as you link it up with the appropriate advertisement backbones. In broadcast, however, whatever you put on air is available for everybody. Everybody hears the same on-air ads in audio. Once we look at Journaline, it has this menu structure where I, as a listener, select the menus and submenus, the topics and subtopics I'm currently interested in. Now imagine if you as a broadcaster design this menu very carefully. The first level is a language selection. You can offer the content in Bahasa Indonesia, you have English, you have maybe German, and some other languages, whatever might be relevant. In tourist areas, you might have even more languages. Obviously, I, as a listener, will natively select the language I can understand. On we go to the next menu hierarchy, where I select the region I'm currently in, because I'm interested in local information. Then I select the topic of interest. I want to read the latest sports updates. And within the sports updates, I'm interested in soccer, in the Major League Soccer. So at that point, if you sell an ad for that particular page or section of pages, the listener that will see these pages has very well described himself implicitly. By being on that particular page, you know what his preferred language is, what region he is in or interested in, and what topics he is interested in. So ads you place and you sell for these pages are highly customized and personalized. And of course, therefore, much more valuable. So that shows is just one example how Journaline can help to bridge this, the personalization of internet with the efficiency of radio broadcasting. And then again, that is a highly important part for extra revenue services. So much about Journaline. I guess you have, I hope you have understood the basics, how it works, how it can be used on its own. Now let's have a look at some of the use cases, how Journaline is used to enable and drive the advanced use cases and applications in DRM. The first example and the most important one on a national and social level is EWF, Emergency Warning Functionality. What that means in a nutshell is that once there is a critical emergency, and we are not discussing a car accident here, a critical emergency like a tsunami rolling in to a certain area, or a chemical plant having had an accident and people need to immediately shut their windows. This kind of emergency where you need to reach people instantly and immediately. This is what emergency warning functionality can enable over the new digital radio platform DRM. The way it works is if you have an affected area, in this case, the light green area, where the local infrastructure, the mobile phone cell towers, for example, may already be out of service and the power may be off. So there's no TV anymore if there's a flooding or there was an earthquake, but the radio sets are still working on battery, either standalone with battery or built into your mobile phone or built into the car. So we can serve this area from a digital radio transmission from outside, from a well-protected infrastructure, still broadcasting, one of the powers of radio. Then once we send out the alarm signal to the receivers either switch to the emergency program, or they can, if properly designed and if put in a national policy, they can switch on automatically from deep standby. Imagine you're sleeping at night and you have a digital radio in your neighboring living room. In the middle of the night, that radio wakes up automatically, goes to full volume, and gives you the instant warning that a tsunami is rolling in and you have to rush away from shore. That is life-saving. To make sure that we reach the as many people as possible, we also have to look at people beyond the regular radio listeners that can speak the local language. So we need a way to reach people that don't speak the local language, that are probably hearing impaired, so they couldn't hear the audio announcement at all. And we have to find a way to provide detailed information. As an example, in the tsunami case, if there is a full list of shelters available, sorted by region, that's something that could never be announced over the air. It has to be made available on demand for people to look up on the radio set. And that's exactly what we do. We use the existing elements of DRM, Digital Radio Mondial, the alarm signaling, the automatic retuning or switch on, the visual indication and volume increase in case there's an alarm, and then the emergency program consisting of audio and of multilingual text. Needless to say, for the text part, we already have the journal-line application, so we use that in addition to text messages. There is technically also the option to use slideshow, at least for local services, but keep in mind that this will only be supported on very high-end receivers, so you cannot rely on that particular application. And journal-line is really the core for all types of receivers, from the cheapest receiver with only a few text lines all the way up to high-end receivers and to car radios. This is an example of how it could look like, the menu structure, which pops up automatically if there's an emergency. So you have the different language selections, you select your language, then you have the different topics, and then you can find out and read on what's going on. Another important element of digital radio is that we don't necessarily have to replace analog audio programs. That's particularly important, I guess, for the public, for the private and community stations. In the past, in analog FM, you had to hope that the people were already tuned to your station. And as an authority, all you could do is interfere and replace all the analog audio programs with the emergency announcement. You would still miss the people who hadn't turned on their radio at the moment, but at least everybody listening to any of the stations, they would get the emergency program. Now, if you live outside the affected area, that's a major disadvantage for you as a listener, because you want to go back to your original program. This emergency doesn't affect you. And again, digital radio has the solution for that. Instead of replacing any program, we add the emergency program on demand to one particular transmission in the affected area, typically by the public broadcaster. That consists of the audio and the journal line text information. But all the other programs on all the other DRM transmissions, they stay on air unaffected. The only thing those programs need to do is they send out the alarm signal to the receiver, and they tell the receiver where to find the emergency program to allow the receiver to switch. But I, as a listener, can then decide that actually this doesn't affect me, and I can simply switch back to my previous program, which is still on air. So no need to replace all the ongoing transmissions. And this is an example of a mock-up service of EWF that RRI has put on air. You have the information for the emergency broadcast in different languages. And if I select in this case, Bahasa Indonesia, I can then find out what's going on in great detail. To make emergency warning functionality happen in Indonesia, it has to become part of the established overall national infrastructure. That includes all the TV stations, all the analog radio stations, all the social media and internet services, all of that. So if there's an emergency, as a public broadcaster, as an authority, in this case, the example is from BMKG, you have to make sure that you use all the tools available at your disposal to reach your people quickly and efficiently. Now, to make digital radio part of that, DRM transmissions, we are in the lucky situation that this is a new rollout. So from day one, the authorities have the option to make sure that EWF is implemented as a core feature, both on the transmission side for all the new transmissions coming on air in DRM, as well as on the receiver side. by providing proper guidance to the industry in the form of policies, receiver policies for digital radio sold in Indonesia going forward. The integration then is pretty straightforward. You have at the center a DRM EWF manager hosted by one of the authorities or by Telkom or one entity in the country. That entity must be connected and receive the information from the various regional and national authorities that declare an emergency and that have the information about the emergency to the left. And then on the right side in this graphic, they have to be connected and know about all the different DRM content servers, meaning all the DRM transmissions going on in the country, along with the information of which areas are covered by that particular content server. And then based on this knowledge and based on the affected region of the emergency, the central DRM EWF manager will select which content servers need to transmit the alarm signal only and which content servers need to, in addition, also carry the actual emergency program. And in practice, this is how it looks like as planned by Telkom Indonesia in a recent workshop with authorities, RRI, Kominfo, and everybody for the application in Indonesia. So it starts at the bottom center where BPBD, the regional authorities to declare an emergency, they have different ways of accessing and declaring that emergency, from push button mobile apps to website interfaces. That's then fed into a central data center which hosts the emergency warning functionality manager for DRM. That creates the DRM format of the emergency based on the emergency type. The journal line text, the audio part, the text messages, the alarm trigger on and later on off. And also it selects the regions which need to carry the emergency and then connects with the appropriate content servers, both in RRI, but in future also in the private stations and in with the community stations. And those content servers then send out the MDI signal with the alarm signal and with the emergency program to each transmitter site. So this is how it looks like, the infrastructure for EWF in Indonesia. I suggest if you have any questions, type them into the chat window. We will be happy to respond to them as much as we can. And I see my colleagues are already doing that. Now let's have a look at another use case for Digital Radio Mondial, where it really excels and shines. That's distance education and radio schooling. How does that look like? Well, you know, with COVID-19 today, we have school closures. I can tell you in Germany, we are just entering a second phase of lockdown, and I'm sure that is going on in many countries around the world. That also means that education is interrupted, and that's critical. You don't want to have a whole year being lost on school children, and who knows how much longer that will carry on. Obviously, gathering in a single place in a school is critical, both for the teachers and for the students, in terms of exchanging the virus as a potential spread center. Digital radio can help in this case. How can it help? With the DRM distance learning application. The idea is that we want to support both class-based learning through digital radio, but also self-learning, self-teaching. If I have some time, whether I'm a student or not, I can join in and I can educate myself on the radio sessions. It's particularly helpful during the pandemics and also in reaching remote areas, which may not always have access to the latest news and latest learning materials. With digital radio, that's suddenly a natural and a given, even if local internet is not well established or not available at all. People don't need internet if we can serve them through DRM, Digital Radio Mondial. How it works? Well, first of all, we have the actual textbook and lesson content. That is transmitted again via journal line, our text application. As a student, I can access this information on demand for my self-studies at any time. I can also use it during the live sessions that will be on air at certain times of the day, sorted by class level, by subject, and so on. So I have a schedule like at school, and I can tune into digital radio at the right time to hear the live lesson given by a teacher. And that teacher will then reference the required pages in the journalline section, in the journalline textbook, just as they would with a physical book during the class. In addition, we have the option for interactivity. We can do quizzes through journalline, a self-evaluation of how far you've come in learning. We can open a channel for Q&A and then rebroadcast that to everybody to make everybody benefit from the questions and the answers given on certain subjects. All of these are possibilities for interactivity. So if you look at it on a transmission chain, you create the audio lectures as a recording, or you have a live session, and you prepare the lecture notes and textbooks in journalline XML format. All of that is transmitted over DRM to the listeners. The actual audio program and journalline is actually uploaded and encoded in the content server. Then we have the studio transmitter link and the actual transmitters. Keep in mind that the radio book, the journalline content, should be on air all the time for all the classes in all the subjects, and probably even in multiple languages simultaneously. One of the benefits of journalline, where in terms of text content, we are basically unlimited in the amount of text content we want to transmit. And on the receiver, I can then access that information in a well-structured way on demand. As a user experience, it could look like this. You have the DRM radio set, the radio receiver. You are listening to the audio session on the left. That's the content that the teacher is talking about. And on the right, you can see the structure of the journalline offering. And you can then access the relevant chapter to follow in with the text information and with the graphics there to follow the class presented by the teacher, or to access it at any time at your own leisure. This is the real world implementation of an example, how it could look like. So you access the radio school as a service on your program in DRM. You select your class level, the topic, the chapter, and then you can join the lesson. And this is an example of such a lesson, followed by a quiz and followed by the answers on a separate page. So for your self-evaluation and self-judgment. Let's have a quick look at how it can look like in a practical environment, just to give you an idea. Here we are joining a radio school session that is just about to start over digital radio with our digital radio set.
Good morning, students. Welcome to Radio School. This session is for Class 4 Mathematics. Today, we will learn about numbers in Chapter 1. Please navigate to the journalline page, Distance Learning, Class 4 Mathematics, Chapter 1, Numbers. Please open Lesson on the journalline. Let us start with classification of numbers. The first set of classification is natural numbers. Now we have a quiz on what we have learned today. Please turn to the next page on the journalline. Please try to answer on your own. The answers to this quiz are in the next page for you to verify. That's it for today. Thank you.
Okay, that was it in a nutshell. Just an example how it can look like in a real world environment. And with that, I've talked way enough. I hope it was of interest to you, looking at both the commercial financial aspects, the services for the listeners, and 2 examples of highly valuable applications that digital radio will enable: emergency warning functionality and radio schooling. And with this, I hand over to Sharat.
Thank you, Alex, for that marathon. It was quite nice, quite very interesting. So let me quickly take you to some other issues and aspects of digital radio which are of lot of interest to our friends in Indonesia. The first part is the DRM radio receivers, and I can see already several questions have been asked in the chat boxes, which I have tried to reply. And let me take you through the automotive, desktop, and portable receivers that are already available. For example, we got a lot of brands of cars here which already have DRM digital radios embedded in them, put into them as line fit. And I can tell you that this is such a great experience. And I'm telling you from a personal experience here. Even on the medium wave, the audio is so clear, and it is far out of the range of a normal AM medium wave station. It goes further than that. You see, this is a Hyundai car, couple of Hyundai cars, and this is the photo shot of the radio that they have, and you can see that it shows text, it shows DRM at 829 kilohertz, and this is how it works. This is the famous Maruti or Suzuki car, as you probably call it in Indonesia. It has many models. It's a premier car, and of course the middle budget car. It also has one of these sets, and it provides you the news. And this is the news from All India Radio, apart from whatever audio services are there. So again, Toyota cars, Mahindra cars. I think some of these cars are also available in Indonesia. And most of these cars have now line fit DRM receivers. You don't have to ask for it as a separate item. It just comes fitted. And you can see here one of the stations of All India Radio in the local language, Hindi, providing through DRM. So these are some of the services. MG, motor garages, cars. So in a nutshell, there are around 2.5 million cars on the road in India today, which have line fit DRM radio receivers. And car manufacturers are not charging anything extra from consumers for these receivers. It just comes with the car. You don't have to pay any extra for that. I think the latest brand is MG Motors, and more international car brands are adding to their cars the DRM receivers, and they are using it as a selling feature because it gives excellent sound. It goes far and far from the radio station. Still, you can get the services very well. So those were for the car radios. Now these are some of the, not all, portable, desktop, home DRM receivers, and this one is the Gospel brand. GR22 is a portable DRM, AM, FM, DRM 3. DRM in AM, FM, and analog. So these are the features. It has the digital radio, it has the analog radio, it has the general line and scrolling text capacity, it has the emergency warning, even RDS is there. And what is very important is that it works either on an AC adapter or on batteries. So it is actually totally portable. This is a great radio to have for your own use or for in the household. I'm waiting for the next slide, and I hope it comes now. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, now we have the, again from Gospel, a portable, a very highly portable AM, FM, DRM radio, has the same features, even has the Bluetooth, and of course, it is an auto scan radio. It has all the features, including the emergency warning. Again, a car stereo radio from Gospel. As you can see, it has even a RAM and a ROM. It is, of course, designed for AM and FM ready band. Has facilities for navigation, backup camera, USB and SD players, and very powerful amplifiers inbuilt into it. This is the Avion receiver, which is made in India, and they have a full DRM feature set in AM and FM, and you can see that this is the price which was which was a few months ago, probably before the end of the beginning of this year, and they were planning to introduce a low-cost DRM receiver, which will, of course, answer many of the questions that the participants have asked about the cost. And this is the Starwave radio. They have produced a very small, handy radios, a lot of features in this, a lot of designs, and they are both DRM, AM, and FM bands, general line, and emergency warning. So in brief, there are many models available, and you can buy them online, and they'll be delivered to you. In addition to that, there are some companies working on providing the services to the OEMs. For example, Intot is one of those. They have the automotive segment with them, and they have receiver solutions. They also have a desktop radio segment and again solutions in there. And they have a smartphone segment. There was a question asked in the chat box about smartphones, and they have a smartphone segment, receiver solution in the FM band using Android smartphones. The DRM reception is achieved through an external tune, and this is a photograph of that particular thing. And in the mobile phones, Fraunhofer is working on a mobile DRM receiver solution with a built-in Wi-Fi spot. And this Wi-Fi spot will serve a lot of tablets and mobile phones around that spot. And you can see a video now. And
2019
Alex
here in New Delhi, we are showing
Alex has some free
a
time,
live
he does
DRM
some
transmission
of
chain in
this
the FM band, broadcasting from our improvised studio. Left is the content server, the audio encoder and data encoder for DRM. Then we have the transmission equipment here, feeding our live antenna, our transmission antenna in the back, and then receiving live with plenty of receiver models at the booth, but most notably with a standard Android phone that has, without any hardware modifications inside, a DRM reception. For this particular model, we are using an external FM front end, an analog FM front end. That's all we need. These are available very cheaply in the market. And then we have the signal fed into the phone, and the whole digital radio reception, the processing, is done in software on Android. That software exists, it's working. We can switch between the different audio services of DRM, and we can even see all the data services that are being broadcast. The goal is, as the next step, once the policy is out by TRAI and the ministry about the digitization of FM band for the private broadcasters, including the private broadcasters, at that point we will be renegotiating with the cell phone industry based on that policy to use the built-in FM front-end chips. So at that point we don't need external equipment, we don't need any attachments. Every FM phone, Android phone, can then receive, with the right software, DRM in the FM band live. 2019 here in New Delhi.
Thanks, Alex, for promoting that. Now, how to go about producing a DRM radio receiver in Indonesia? And we believe that the first way to do that is to have an official DRM radio receiver policy in Indonesia. And we have sort of suggested as an example what that radio policy could be like. For example, the national policy on radio receivers, DRM receivers, will provide guidance to manufacturers, show its commitment to this particular industry, and promote the radio industry. So a national policy on receivers is an important subject that hopefully will be looked up by the authorities. So this policy may have the following elements. May is a suggestion that it should address a portable tabletop and home use receivers. It should also address automotive receivers in cars, in truck cabins for long distance trucks, and in three-wheel autos, which are also known as tuk-tuks in many countries. And I think in Indonesia, it's called Bajaj. So it is also useful for that. And this policy could provide an outline of mandatory features like the DRM system and audio and text that is to be used, the tuning bands, AM, FM, for example, and of course, mandatory emergency warning functionality, and also journal line. So because journal line provides a lot of features. You could also have some optional features that the manufacturers may provide, and of course leave the implementation to the radio industry and auto OEMs. So this will be a very important first step towards producing auto DRM receivers in Indonesia. Now, what is the industry going to do, the radio receiver industry? Now, we believe that the best way to implement DRM digital radio in Indonesia is by making consumer and auto DRM radios within the country, just within the country, which we in a later stage we call Make in Indonesia. And these, of course, will be as per Kominfo's national specifications as and when issued. So who are the stakeholders in this industry? Those who are currently making analog radio, those who are currently probably making new digital radio startups, those who may start new, and then current OEM radio makers for cars and automobiles, and new digital radio makers for cars, and of course the retail industry. So all these people will be very much interested in knowing how the digital radio industry will go and grow in Indonesia. And I'm sure that they're all waiting for some positive steps to take place. And the next slide, let me see, yes, sorry. So, so there are several ways to make this happen, to make in Indonesia. For example, you could have technology transfer for consumer radios from some of these countries where the radios are being already produced. And you could have technology transfer from some of the OEMs of leading brands in Asian region or in other parts of the world. Or you could probably do joint ventures with foreign makers and make in Indonesia, or even start a kick-off technology transfer. There are other ways of technology transfer rather than purchasing the band itself. So these are some of the ideas that we thought we will share with you, how the industry can go and provide a much needed DRM, digital radio receiver, in Indonesia. And then that is not all, because once the DRM radio receiver is produced in Indonesia, in the whole region, there is a lot of demand. There is a lot of opportunity for selling it in so many countries, I think including in India itself. So that was about the radio receivers, and hopefully some of the questions asked by participants have been answered. Now we come to a very important subject, which is community broadcasting by DRM radio. And I know there are a lot of participants from the community radio sector here. Now, I think we believe that the community radio will benefit most by migrating from analog FM to radio DRM digital FM. What are the reasons? For example, 3 of the community radio stations, currently 3 stations can share 1 transmitter, 1 modulator, 1 content server, and 1 site, which is 1 antenna, 1 feeder, 1 tower. So instead of having 3 towers, 3 feeders, 3 antennas, 3 transmitters, etc., you need only 1, because the DRM FM in 1 slot provides 3 audio services which are in stereo. And then what happens is, then all this together with some work, there is a reasonable chance of an affordable broadcast equipment, in one box. That is, it contains a content server, it contains a modulator and a transmitter. So instead of having 3 transmitters, 3 modulators, 3 input equipment, you have just 1 box, a small box, which contains all these 3 units, and this will be shared by 3 broadcasters. So this is very affordable. So what is the result? That each of the community radio broadcasters will share the capex and opex. So they will have to pay only 1/3 of the previous costs. And then they save a lot of money on the power and the operating costs on the power bills. And most importantly, the control on the content remains with the individual broadcaster. It's not a multiplex that only one person controls the content. No, the individual broadcasters still control their content, what content should go, when it should go, in what form it should go. So this is a sort of a schematic for a one-box DRM solution for community broadcasting, where you have one stereo audio 1, stereo audio 2, stereo audio 3, up to 3 audios, and then general line and data services, as has been pointed out by Alex in the previous presentation. We have the 3 units, DRM content server with basic features, we have the DRM modulator, and we have the FM band transmitter, and the output goes to the antenna. So this is a very simple configuration, and you have to remember that this will be shared by 3 broadcasters, putting their individual services on air and not a single multiplex. Waiting for the next slide. It's taking a bit of time. Okay. Yeah, so these are the services that each of the community broadcasters will be able to run. Stereo audio, general line text for which he gives news, city information, community information, weather, etc. And then we can configure individual general line for each of the stations. So they have their own general line text. They don't have a common text. They can have a common, but their own general line text. So both audio and general line can have revenue earning possibilities if it is allowed by law. Otherwise, they can have endorsement and they can have support of other organizations. You have text messages, you have station labels. Most importantly, you have the radio school possibilities and the emergency warning function. So this is a full-fledged catalog of services that you can have even in the community broadcasting situation when you share the infrastructure and you share the whole infrastructure, and then you share the facilities and pay only 1/3 the cost. I think Alex wants to take over now, and after that, I think I'll come back and see you again. Alex?
Yes, thank you very much, Sharad. Now, after having talked about the various applications and users on the broadcast side, on the receiver side, this is the time to talk about the industry in Indonesia, what it means for them to introduce DRM, particularly the broadcast and the receiver industry. So first of all, let me state that DRM is an open technology. That means that no single company owns the technology and can hand out or not grant licenses to individual companies as they want. Everybody can download the DRM specification and start building products without asking anyone else. In particular, the DRM consortium, though being responsible for the further development of the technology, it doesn't own the technology as such. And this really underlines that DRM is the successor technology of analog AM and FM. And that's very much in contrast to what you know probably from other standards or systems like US-based systems where a single company owns the technology at the heart of the whole national digital FM broadcast infrastructure. Something that in Europe at least would never be acceptable. I'm not sure what the situation is in Indonesia. So DRM is an open technology. That means that manufacturers don't have to ask anybody for a DRM license. Manufacturers of both transmission equipment, receiver equipment, you just download the documents. All the elements of the DRM standard are available and published, and you can start building up local know-how and infrastructure. In addition, it is important to stress, because again, that's not a given in all other systems, neither broadcasters nor consumers, listeners, have to pay any royalties or use fees to use DRM, to broadcast or to receive. Again, that's different with the digital FM system used in the US, where broadcasters have to pay annual fees to the owner of the technology to be even able to broadcast in that particular technology. So again, that's different. It's just like AM and FM today. As a broadcaster, you purchase your transmission equipment and you go on air. whether you want to broadcast one service or 3 and however many data services, that's between you and the regulator. You don't have to pay anybody extra. And the same with the receivers. As we know today from all the mobile phones, TVs, all the media equipment, of course, there are IP royalties that need to be paid, but they are paid by the manufacturers of transmission equipment and of receivers. You, as a user, as a broadcaster, as a listener, you don't care. You buy the equipment and that's it. Importantly, the very low IP royalties that apply for DRM are all published. They are available on a non-discriminatory level, so nobody can be denied a license or to pay these royalties and to be selling their equipment. And for your information, the running royalty for XHE AAC audio codec, the classic AAC audio codec, and journal, the whole package of core features, that's in the range of about $1.10 for individual units, and then it goes down to like 40 cents or so per device one time with quantities. In addition to this question of licensing and royalties, there is the question of available components if you want to start building your own products, or let's say your own DRM receivers. And I'm happy to tell you that all these individual modules, from individual decoders, audio decoder, journal line decoder, baseband decoder, up to whole service layer and complete DRM core receiver implementations are available. And Fraunhofer, the not-for-profit organization I work for, we are one of the suppliers of these core components to the industry, to allow the industry to start building and developing their own DRM products quickly and efficiently in the country. As we discussed earlier, there is the opportunity for new revenue sources for the broadcasters. Looking at just the technical benefits of DRM, you have a better audio quality that can attract more listeners, more ads, and probably you can ask for more money for ads. You have the option for secondary audio programs and for pop-up temporary stations to go along with upcoming major festivals or events like big international concerts, stuff like that. You could, depending on the regulator, you might be able to increase your coverage area or to provide a better coverage in your licensed area, and therefore you can reach more audiences in a better way. And we have good indoor coverage, excellent reception in cars. So again, that helps to grow the number of listeners. And on top of that, there is this opportunity, in addition to the classic audio ads, to also use journal line and the advanced features of DRM to open new channels of revenue in terms of ads, sponsorship, and general revenue opportunities within these clusters of city entertainment, local information, financial updates, all of these, personal messaging. You have the consumer targeting that I mentioned earlier, that allows you to structure your journal line service in a way that the ads you place in certain sections are much more targeted and specific, and therefore can yield a much higher price than just broadcasting them in the same way to everybody. You can add graphics with a slideshow feature, with a journal line feature. You have the hot button interactivity, which you can use on the one hand to make the ads and the link with commercial elements and ad partners more attractive. But you can also use the hot button interactivity on connected devices to get an instant feedback of audiences and listener involvement in your program. So you don't have to wait until the next quarterly or half annually questioning of listeners to get audience numbers. You can get that instantly while the show is going on by measuring the interactivity that your listeners engage with based on your hot button offerings. And we have radio schooling, which is a great opportunity in terms of sponsorships as part of that program, maybe fees that could be charged for special programs. and there might be government grants and international grants to this kind of support services over digital radio. So just a few ideas how you could look at digital radio, new opportunities for revenue. And with that, I want to add one more use case. So we had Journaline in itself as a standalone text application, which has great potential. We looked at emergency warning functionality. We looked at the radio schooling option. And now I want to have a look at public signage service. That was already discussed also in the comments. Public signage is one element where DRM can really shine again, one use case. The idea is that you have large signage boards in public places, in central squares in a city, in the central places at villages, along the highways maybe, or in other places. What we do is we, again, based on Journaline, we deliver the text and graphics along with dedicated rendering information, all based on HTML and CSS technologies, to make sure that the Journaline content that other listeners could look at on their small radio sets is then properly rendered in a different way, but the same content for the large screens, to make use of the space we have for the large public signage screens. It can be used for many types of information, sports updates, news updates, governmental news, weather forecasts. In India, as an example, for the rural population, it's particularly important to have the latest stock prices publicly known to everybody in the villages, like onion prices and so on. So it depends on the broadcaster's audience, on the public broadcaster's mission, what kind of information would make sense for these public signages. And of course, then, if you run it as a commercial service, using that for instantly updated ads in between is a great opportunity. We can also use it as one outlet for emergency warning functionality. And how that works and how it looks like is something that we recorded recently at BES in India. And I want to show you in a mock-up public screen that we put up with a live DRM reception behind, with a small receiver behind the screen, and the content based on standard Journaline just rendered in a proper way. And that, as you can see in the little graphic, that mock-up public screen is installed on a public rural village square or a marketplace in some area in India, as an example. So let's have a look.
DRM, Digital Radio Mondial, is more than just your digital next generation AM and FM. It can do a lot more for the public and for the good of the society. Let's have a look at one example that we are presenting at BES. This is the public signage service based on DRM transmission, which means that this public signage service, to be installed in a public place, does not require any internet, any working IP, any mobile connection. It receives the information over the air from the DRM transmission of All India Radio. In this case, the content that is presented on this public signage demonstrator is exactly the same Journaline content that is shown on all the radios receiving live signal here at the booth at BES. In this case, we have lots of information. We have sports updates, latest political news, we have celebrity news, M.ANDRI prices with the latest stock updates on onions, and so on. Plenty of information sources. However, the true magic happens if, God forbid, an emergency happens. Let's say a tsunami is rolling in, and the public needs to be informed as quickly as possible to get away, to find a shelter. This is what we can do with the public signage as well. Actually, in the case of an emergency, the public signage screen becomes a full public announcement service. We switch on the audio, we alert the people surrounding the screen, we have the bar that indicates there's an emergency going on, and we have the information, the news about the type of information and what people need to do to get to safety.
If this had been an actual emergency, you would have been instructed.
So it gives you a rough idea of how it can look like. One of the huge benefits of these public screen services based on DRM is that A, we use very efficient content coding. We can transmit images overnight, and then during the day, we just use those images, at least the more generic ones. We can update the rendering on the screen to the taste and the content source, the publisher's layout, and all of that. And then when you install these screens, all you need is a power source, physical AC power, or it could maybe in future even be solar powered. And you need the antenna for DRM. You don't need any other local infrastructure. You don't need mobile phone coverage, mobile network coverage, and all of that. And this is also why these public screens are so sturdy when it comes to emergency information, for example. And again, having them as emergency alert panels and public announcement installations is something that might be relevant to the authorities dealing with emergency warning in the country, and might be a possibility for co-sponsoring, for co-setting up this kind of equipment. It gives you an idea what can be done. The important part is it's all based on journal-line again, so it is compatible with all the other DRM receivers, even though rendered in a very different way. If you want to now find out what All India Radio is what RRD is doing with their live FM band transmissions, we've seen earlier there's already 5 places where these transmissions are available on air in simulcast mode along with analog FM. You can also see that all of them are along shores to make sure that they can be used for emergency warning functionality, particularly in the combination with tsunamis rolling in. The RRD luckily has, and we are thankful for that, has set up a public monitoring service. So you can connect to the given URL here and check out, even listen to the program for yourself and see the journal line that is on air. So this is live content that is being broadcast in these places as we speak. And with that, I hand over back to Sharad to give us a few more visions and ideas of applications that digital radio can be used for beyond pure audio and future radio services. Sharad?
Thank you, Alex. And now we know that how and why you are such a popular TV host. I am standing in for my colleague, Brandlins, and he wanted to talk to you about highway radio through DRM. As we have already discussed some time ago, that DRM, digital radio, is the best and most cost-effective and most potent system to use for highway radio. So what is that highway radio requires? What we actually do for highway radio, this is the vision, that we provide multiple services to auto users along highways and national trunk roads in Indonesia, for example. This could be a vision. Then the broadcast provide information and advisories. So we provide information and advisories in the broadcast mode, help ensure safety, security of highway auto users through timely information, and provide service bundles with safety, entertainment, and information packages, and deliver emergency warning to auto users, which is also a very important function of any service that you provide to users. So this is sort of an outline of what could be the vision and the objectives of highway radio, in addition, of course, to providing entertainment to them. Waiting for the next one. Yeah, okay. Now, this is sort of a schematic representation of how highway radio through DRM will work. This is an example of a highway in India between New Delhi and Jaipur, which is around 250 kilometers, and it uses only 10 Sepulu DRM transmitter sites for a 262 kilometer long highway. And each of these has a transmitter, and this is the this is the pattern. This is the antenna pattern or coverage pattern between the transmitters. So it really covers the highway and provides, these are some of the technical parameters, and provides coverage, almost uniform coverage throughout the highway. So if you start from New Delhi and drive down and go to Jaipur, then you have the coverage all through. This you cannot achieve by analog radio or analog FM radio or analog AM radio unless you provide double the number of sites and high power, and even then the reception in a moving vehicle will not be as good or may fade out in the analog mode. But in the DRM mode, it is assured and everything is smooth. So this is the best way to have highway coverage through radio to provide all the services that we have indicated. This is antenna radiation pattern kind of a thing, that this transmitter looking to the side provides this coverage, this transmitter looking this side provides this coverage, and they are all in SFM and mode. So the coverage actually is something like this, and it covers all the highway throughout these two, this part of the highway throughout the whole highway of 250 kilometers. In addition to this, any nearby towns and villages along the highway are automatically covered through highway radio. So they also receive radio coverage. And so this is quite a good system for covering the highways and national roadways in Indonesia. We know that Sumatra Island is quite longish. Java Island is about 2 hours flight by plane from Jakarta to Surabaya, for example. So this will be an ideal system to use for those who travel by road. So that was one usage. The other usage is how DRM radio can be used to deliver the sound for drive-in cinema. Now, drive-in cinema is basically, as you know, there's a huge cinema screen. People go in cars, sit in the cars, and see the movie through the front screen. But for audio, it has to be a very elaborate system for each car. Outside the car, there has to be a loudspeaker, or there has to be sockets for connecting headphones. It's quite an elaborate one and also very cumbersome one. But if you modulate the cinema sound on the DRM radio, then you can use DRM radio for delivering the cinema sound in the cars. All the cars have DRM radio, so you don't have to have anything, no new gadget. So this is one of the many use cases of DRM FM radio. The cinema sound is modulated on DRM FM radio. You can have a stereo one. If you have the wherewithal, you can have a multi-channel one. And it can be delivered to drive-in cinemas in multiple languages sometimes. If you have 2 languages, for example, many of you are fans of Jodha Akbar and the other such movies that come from India, and they're all dubbed. So you can have a dubbed language, and you can have the original language, and of course the original music. And this is a much better, effective, and cost-efficient solution. It provides good quality in-car sound, and you can have an enhanced cinematic experience right in the car. And if you need additional information on the characters, on the scenes, this can be delivered by general line through digital radio. And of course, as you say that you can enjoy this without any hassle. So this is quite a good solution for drive-in cinema. A similar solution can be used for the concerts, drive-in concerts, and these can also provide enhanced sound and so on and so forth. So these are some of the use cases that we thought that might be of interest to all of you. And now I hand over to our colleague, Ruxandra, for the concluding remarks. Ruxandra?
Thank you very much. I know we have been speaking for a long time. We have also seen your questions, and we will continue with the questions after this conclusion. But as they say, we have to tell you what we are going to say it, and now tell you what we told you. I hope you got our message and understood why we think that a DRM is the standard for FM band, not only for FM and AM band. We've tried to show you how DRM solves a lot of the current challenges that the Indonesian radio industry is facing at the moment. I come back to costs for both capital and operational. Remember those many, many transmitters and the 3 boxes. So digital saves you money. And it also offers you opportunities to get new revenues. It is, and it can be, an absolutely major part of the emergency warning system standard that you are using and you are needing in Indonesia. And digital radio offers opportunities for community radio and many other services, as we saw highway, we saw cinema, so there are, and also the education. So there are loads of applications and places and new areas that DRM for FM can be used. And if we go to the next conclusion, and there are not many conclusions, I will also want to tell you that, remember, you do not need new spectrum. You don't need band 3, 4, the 700 spectrum and so on. But you can use the spectrum you have already for providing up to 3 stereo audio services and text through journal without the internet. And that's very important, because I imagine that there are fishermen communities, faraway communities, and frankly, there is no way they will get broadband very soon. At the same time, in times of crisis and pandemic crisis like now, you can provide schooling through digital radio. And again, huge potential for revenue, new revenue streams, ads and other ways. Next one. Yes, next slide, please, Alex. Please, next slide. So there are steps to do that. And some of your questions that have come during the presentation has shown real concerns. It cannot happen overnight. It's not, DRM is not magic. It is like magic when it works, but there is a way to that. And you need standardization in spectrum, you need to look at transmitters and also create and develop a receiver industry. We also think it is the best solution for community radio, which could be quashed if there is no path for the digitization of community radio stations. They can share equipment, costs and services, which is essential because community stations don't have big budgets. And we talked again and again about new revenue and business opportunities, new business models. I think we saw the drive-in cinema sound, the radio school, the public signage, the big screen that somebody was mentioning, and the highway radio. The technology exists, it is modern, it is stable, it's not going to change tomorrow. The consortium exists, not for profit, and the companies within it as well. And you can benefit from technology transfer to get a lot of the elements of the chain in Indonesia. Made in Indonesia is what we support. Remember, no licensing fees faced by consumers or broadcasters, and that's a great advantage. And the same thing applies not only to FM, but also to medium wave. Somebody asks, what's the difference between DRM and DRM Plus? There is no such thing as DRM and DRM Plus. There is one DRM which can be applied for AM, medium wave in this case, or FM, or any of the 3 bands in VHF. So one DRM, the same benefits. If you want to find out more, please go to this link. You will be able to download the handbook for free and read it at your leisure. So that's a gift from us to you. And if you want to keep in touch with us, you can write to us at drm.org, and you can keep in touch very, very easily, and we will be happy to work with you together. So thank you once again for your great patience, great questions, great hosting to Kominfo. And now let's address some of your questions. I think the way we are going to do the questions, some of them have come on chat, but if you want to come on video and ask live your questions, that is possible as well. So who's going to have the courage to pose the first question? I'm really sorry that we can't do it in Bahasa, which would be much, much easier. And maybe some of the people who wanted to participate and could not will have a chance to do that if Kominfo feels that this is a valuable event and we could repeat it so more people get to see it and more people get to ask questions. So, any question? I'm looking at the chat, but I promised to learn Bahasa. I don't understand what. What is
I was wondering, Mr. Benny, do you want to host the questions? After all, you're the host of the event as Kominfo. If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I unmute the wrong laptop. Baik, Bapak Ibu, apabila ada pertanyaan bisa disampaikan baik dalam bahasa Inggris atau bahasa Indonesia. Apabila bahasa Indonesia nanti saya bantu untuk ditranslate ke bahasa Inggris. Silakan, ada yang mau bertanya?
So,
this is your chance.
Maybe you can take off the slide, Alex.
Sure. I just thought that maybe for answering the questions, we might need to refer to some of them.
Okay.
We see Dedi Subkhan there. Do you want to ask a question?
Ya, silakan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Selamat sore.
Silakan, Pak.
Okay.
Silakan, tadi PRSSNI dari Kalimantan Barat.
Okay, thank you for the one question from me. If the listener have the laptop or the Android receiver, have the new application more? Thank you.
I didn't quite get the question. So the question was if the application for DRM reception is available for Android and Windows tablets, right? To receive DRM.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
I think there's some listener for our radio digital this week. They have the receiver digital. That's right.
Right.
Okay.
So if you have a digital radio set,
apakah dia punya aplikasi tersendiri di laptop itu ataupun di Android-nya. Itu maksudnya.
Does somebody want to translate?
Sorry, again I unmute the wrong laptop. Okay, so the
we have the
question
listener.
is,
We have the listener of our digital radio. That's right, in Indonesia. I think example at the Pontianak city, the city of West Kalimantan Barat. My listener must be receive the digital receiver. That's right. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, but they have from laptop for receiver. That's right. It's okay.
Yeah.
But what they have, the listener have the application new or the not? Application for the receiver, the digital radio FM.
Right. So this comes down to the policies of the country. For example, if you look at the situation in Europe, all the radio sets that are now sold, both as standalone radios as an automotive radios, have to include digital radio support by default. That's the medium-term idea. For the short term, the easiest way for listeners is to purchase new desktop radios for at home, and also to implement or to use DRM reception on the laptop and on the mobile phone. For the time being, as a first step, very first step, the mobile phones and the laptops can be used with an external FM dongle, just a small analog FM dongle. They are available quite cheaply. And then they can download the DRM app from the App Store. We are working now with manufacturers to make this app available to everybody. But on request, both Prasni and M.ANDRI and Kominfo already have access to these apps to showcase. So the medium term, again, for mobile phones, is that DRM should be built in, at least for the FM band, as a default feature. Because all the phones that have analog FM support today, and that even includes the latest Samsung A series models and so on, they can also receive DRM in the FM band without any hardware modification. All the manufacturers need to do is open up the API to this FM frontend. And once that's done, then of course also the required app is part of that phone, and you don't need to download separate apps or have separate external dongles anymore. And with the car industry, it's the same. In Europe, to implement digital radio in the cars, it took decades. And luckily now, thanks to the progress of India and other places in DRM, we are in the situation that most major brands of cars have DRM already as an option, depending on the country where the car is sold. So once the regulation for Indonesia is announced, they can simply enable DRM in these modern cars. It's no longer a question of developing or implementing a new technology. It's just to make sure that they understand that for cars sold into Indonesia, DRM is a requirement just as it is for India today.
Okay. Thank you for the explains.
Yeah, thanks.
Makasih, Mas. Makasih, Mas, dari yang Kominfo.
Baik, terima kasih, Pak.
Waktunya.
Silakan, ada yang mau bertanya lagi?
More questions. Who is the brave one? This is your opportunity.
Courage.
And I guess you can both ask us as well as Kominfo as the host of that event, if you have any questions to them.
Halo.
Ya, silakan Pak Ruli.
Baik, terima kasih. Saya dalam bahasa Indonesia saja ya, karena tidak begitu lancar.
Silakan Pak.
Terkait tadi penjelasan dari menjelaskan tentang DRM EWS ya. EWF ya, sorry. Emergency Warning ya. kami sebagai provider informasi ya, karena kita dari BMKG Papua, bagaimana caranya kami bisa untuk menyebarkan informasi ya, kalau tadi pertanyaan banyak bagaimana menerima, bagaimana ketika ada bencana begitu, gempa seperti itu, kita bisa menyampaikan melalui sistem ini. Mohon penjelasannya. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Ruli. So a question from Pak Ruli from BMKG pertaining to how to broadcast the emergency warning message through DRM from the BMKG and through the network of the broadcaster.
Okay,
that is the question.
In a nutshell, and we can probably send you the slides from the recent workshop at RRI, where we discussed the emergency warning functionality in detail. But in a nutshell, there is this the central entity that deals with the conversion of the information, emergency warning information, for the DRM transmission. That will probably be hosted by the RRI IT center or a similar place. It has to have the connection to your information where you distribute to all the different outlets the status of emergencies. Where you can trigger emergencies, you indicate the affected region and the affected the type of emergency. And based on this information, the central entity, the DRM EWF manager, can look at its database of prepared content to immediately create the broadcast content. The audio is just a WAV file or an MP3 file. The journal line information is an XML file or a set of XML files. That should be prepared for the different types of emergency. And then depending on the affected area that you define along with the alarm trigger, this DRM EWF manager decides which of the DRM transmission need to carry the emergency program, the audio and journal line, and all the other DRM transmissions in that affected area, or at least partly covering the affected area, they have to carry the alarm signal, telling the receiver that there is an active alarm and pointing the receiver to the emergency program. And the emergency program itself will typically be carried by the public broadcaster in that area, RRI in this case. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, can I add a bit to this, Alex?
Sure, go ahead.
In very straightforward terms, the BMKG will start an electronic signal from its control center once there is an event. The signal will go electronically and reach the stations of RRI, where the RRI will direct the signals to their transmitters, to the respective transmitters. So what Alex has told you is the process by which it will happen. This is all electronic and automatic. And so everything is done automatically after BMKG decides that they must give an alarm for an emergency. So this is totally without human intervention. Now, all this system has to be pre-set up once for all. And that process has, to our understanding, started after RRI did a large workshop and a meeting of all the concerned stakeholders in which BMKG and local agencies were involved, in which Kominfo was there. We understand that now that process is getting finalized, and soon a final meeting will take place, which will decide all the issues, put into place all the elements, and declare that emergency warning will henceforth be carried out by broadcasters from a certain date.
And maybe to add also, Indonesia is in a fantastic position at this time because you are introducing a migration step from analog radio to digital. So it's not an afterthought. Emergency warning is part of that migration to digital from day one. And we can make sure, therefore, that it is properly implemented with all the broadcasters coming on air and also part of all the receivers with DRM sold in Indonesia going forward. So it's a great opportunity. And as Sharad said, in terms of signaling, everything has to be automated. There is a two-stage process. The first stage, the authority, you or the regional authorities, just need to provide the type of emergency and the affected area and trigger the alarm. All the actual content that is played out is from a database of prepared content for this, generic content for this particular application type. And then once the alarm is on air and people have at least the instant warning, then you can go back as the authority and provide specific details. So you can change the audio announcement to a more specific announcement for the incident. And in the journal line, you can add more specific details for that particular event that is coming up. That's the second phase.
Alex, there are two questions here, and I picked them up from the written thing. One from Jan K. Kai. The question is if every radio station needs a head end, a new head end, and there is also the worry that maybe that is too expensive for smaller stations. And the second question, if you can part both, the DRM transmitter is using no internet, although I think for the MDI, for the stream from the studio, you can use internet. The question is if the mobile, the phone receiver, needs special kit, embedded hardware for DRM support. So one is about the head end to the transmitter, in other words, turning the transmitter from analog to digital. And the other one is from turning your mobile phone into a digital receiver.
Okay, let's start with the first question, the head end. It is like with all the transmitters, for example, and all the studio infrastructure, there is a professional level, and then there is a more focused level on the essential features for smaller stations and for community stations. And the price will just scale along with the requirements. Not everybody needs the full professional feature set and automation and integration into the broadcast infrastructure. So there will be different levels of head end available of the DRM content server. And Sharad mentioned the one box integrated with a modulator and transmitter for small community stations that don't even need a dedicated head end implementation. That's number one. So don't worry about the pricing. Also keep in mind, I showed you the numbers and the calculations. The one-time investment into this DRM equipment may seem like an extra cost, but it is already less than investing into a new FM transmitter as a replacement. And if you take on board the over time savings in energy and running costs, it more than pays for itself. That's number one, even if you go for the professional head ends. And also keep in mind, one DRM content server can serve any number of transmitters as long as they carry the same program. If you have a nationwide network with the same content, you only need one single head end in the studio. And in terms of community stations, there was the presentation by Sharad or by Ruxandra that multiple stations in a certain place could actually join and only require a single infrastructure for up to 3 programs. So again, there's a cost saving. The next question was about receiving in the mobile phones. The huge advantage of DRM in the FM band, and that's different from all the other digital radio standards, is that it doesn't require any change of hardware in the mobile phones. As long as the mobile phones support the reception of analog FM and can make the digitized analog FM available to the application layer, similar to what a sound card does. They tune to the FM frequency you want to tune to, and they digitize the signal at that frequency. And if they can make that digital signal available to the application layer, all the rest is just software, just an application you need to install. The reason why we cannot do this from day one is because the manufacturers want to see the policy, the official adoption in a country first, before they make this API available and invest into making it available. But over the medium and long term, the difference to other digital radio standards is that DRM does not require new components, which means extra cost and new designs. Instead, it can use the existing phones as they are with the existing FM front-end hardware. The only thing is it needs a change in firmware to give access to that digital FM signal. And all the DRM reception then, as I said, is just software.
It would be interesting if there are, and I apologize, I do not know this, if there are mobile manufacturers in Indonesia. It would be very interesting to do a little test and show how, with access to API, to a little bit of a gate there in the mobile, we could turn the mobile phone into a digital FM DRM receiver. So if any of you still on the call are interested, please let us know, because then we could demonstrate it to everyone, Kominfo, RRI, whoever, how this is done. And that is much more powerful than trying to explain it. And I want you to come back to the head end. Head end, you think of it as a transmitter on a site or on a block of flats, and then you add something to it. We think more of a laptop kind of thing in the studio. And this is why Alex is saying that you can have one head end and then feed it to several transmitter sites. So don't think it is a huge thing or a very complicated. And when we talk, let's not mix internet with terrestrial broadcasting. With DRM, we are in terrestrial, one to many. But the actual digitized program signal can be transferred to the transmitter site, wherever it is. It might be on a hill somewhere, through various ways. And one is also internet. So that's, keep it aside. One is the broadcasting to the listener, and one is the kitchen, how we are preparing our things. And the content server is best in the studio, in your control. Remember, you stay in control of your station, of your transmission, of your content.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And now we have a question, Harris or Harris?
Yes, but I want to raise my question to Kominfo, is possible?
Please, yes.
Yes, in bahasa ya.
Silakan, Pak.
Itu Mas, ini roadmap-nya migrasi ke digital untuk radio itu seperti apa Mas? Mohon penjelasannya Mas, kapan mulai dan seterusnya Mas.
Jadi di konsep RUU penyiaran itu, untuk digitalisasi radio berbeda dengan digitalisasi TV, Pak. Kalau TV, kita ada tanggal ASO yang definitif. Kemarin di Undang-Undang Cika sudah ditetapkan 2 tahun, berarti sampai 2 November 2022. Tapi untuk digitalisasi radio, berdasarkan benchmark juga di negara-negara lain, itu natural proses, Pak. Jadi radio digital ini hadir berangkatnya sebagai komplement dulu, bukan substitusi. Nanti by time aja, siapa yang memilih untuk migrasi ke digital, silakan. Yang mau stay di analog juga silakan. Jadi dia berbeda konsepnya dengan TV digital, gitu Pak.
Dimulai kapan Mas?
Kalau nanti aturannya sudah diterbitkan, itu sudah lengkap aturannya ya. Jadi aturan teknis, aturan perizinan, maka itu sudah bisa. Sekarang masih dipersiapkan dulu.
Jadi tidak ada ASO, tapi akan dimulai kira-kira kalau di Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja itu kan paling lambat 2 tahun. Apa akan mengikuti itu kira-kira?
Enggak, di Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja itu spesifik yang 2 tahun itu hanya untuk TV analog. Ya, kalau untuk radio analog itu tetap natural proses kalau di konsep RUU penyiaran.
Baik, Mas, cukup, Mas. Terima kasih.
Okay, so the question was pertaining to is there any specific date for the analog switch off in digital radio? And this is a different concept in digital TV. In digital TV, we have specific analog switch off date, but in digital radio, the introduction of digital radio, we depart from as the complement to the analog transmission, and it will be by time to decide whether the broadcaster want to migrate to digital or they want to stay in analog. There is no specific date on the analog switch off. All will be going on natural process. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And there was one more question regarding the radio schooling use case that we presented. If then all the students of a classroom or of a community or of a family have to gather around the small screen on the receiver. That is being addressed as we speak in cooperation with the manufacturer of radios for DRM, one of the manufacturers that Sharad presented. And the way it is addressed is that in the DRM radio, you have a Wi-Fi hotspot and a web server built in. So you can connect with any mobile device, phone, tablet, PC that has a Wi-Fi and a web browser to that DRM radio. It does not require internet. It just connects to the Wi-Fi that the radio opens up. And then you can stream and listen to the audio. And you can also fully access the journal line information and the data services on your web browser with any device surrounding that radio. So a single DRM radio with hotspot feature can be shared by a whole family, household, or by a community, or by a classroom.
Alex, I just wanted to add that for a large classroom or large meeting hall, you could also use the signage type of a display, which could either directly connect to DRM radio through an HDMI or through the hotspot. And also, Paveni and other colleagues, there is a project in one of the ASEAN countries, which is being mooted and planned to provide DRM school service to all those villages and towns which are unconnected by internet. So I think some good progress has been made in that, and that would be a good example to follow in those areas where there is no internet, but still radio school can operate and provide education. This is quite a large country with a large population, and it will be very interesting to know about the results of that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Very good point.
I can see somebody who is trying to ask a question. Yeah? If you unmute yourself, we will hear you.
Okay. Could I?
Silakan Pak Abu.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
Pak Abu from Telecom.
Hi, Abu.
We meet again, Alex and Ruxanda. Just wonder, is there another party beside RRI to start the digital radio broadcasting in Indonesia, Alex, based on your experience? Because we support RRI to implementing early warning functionality, but I just want to know, is there any someone or somebody contact you to start to together with RRI to implement the digital radio or DRM in Indonesia, or maybe you can tell us?
Sure, and I mean, we have the colleagues from Prasni and from the community stations with us. Let me tell you that as a consortium, we are open to everybody, whoever wants to test DRM and gain some experience and understand how it works. That's the job of the DRM consortium, to help and to support as much as we can. And of course, we are very happy to support the members of Prasni and other broadcast organizations if they are ready to start testing DRM. And then otherwise, I think it will be a tiered rollout once the regulator is ready. And I'm not sure, Benny, to what extent you can already indicate if there's a timetable or something. But the message for you, Abu, is in terms of emergency warning functionality, that as soon as additional broadcasters come out and start DRM transmissions, the same with RRI, adding more DRM services in future, maybe on medium wave and more FM services. All of these DRM licenses have to be, from day one, integrated into the EWF network to make sure that at least the alarm signal can be sent over all these DRM transmissions, even over private and community stations networks, so that the receivers can pick up the alarm and then switch to the emergency program. I think that even in future, the emergency program itself will most likely always be provided on RRI's transmissions.
Sorry,
so
Alex,
yeah.
Could you explain more about the digital community as you mentioned before? What's community is it? Is there in Indonesia or on the other country?
Well, with community broadcasters, I mean very local,
it's everywhere.
Often not-for-profit broadcasters that serve a special community. In many countries, you have the 3 tiers of broadcasting. You have the regional, national, public broadcasters with a mandate to serve everybody. Then you have the commercial broadcasters who provide radio services to generate an income as a service to everybody. And then you have community stations, which sometimes are for profit, sometimes not. And they serve a very small, very local community with local information, local connectivity between people in that area.
Actually, my answer to Pa Abu is this. Pa Abu, generally all broadcasters and other such agencies are expected to be part of the National Disaster Communication Program. So this includes the public broadcasters, private broadcasters, other broadcasters. Now, all this basically depends on the policy or the rules that are formed by the National Disaster Mitigation Committee, which you have probably BMK as to who should be part, and of course, probably even Kominfo will play a part in it. But given the diverse let's say landscape and geographical spread of Indonesia over so many 17,000 islands, out of which 1,100 are inhabited, the best policy would be to ask all broadcasters to join this emergency warning delivery service using their networks. So the question is not who, but I think the answer is all of them would be probably expected to join. But of course, this is a policy matter of the government. It needs to be, I'm sure the government is addressing it very well.
Okay, Sharat, the question to Pak Ismail. Pak Ismail from Kominfo. Pak Ismail, memang seperti apa ya kalau community broadcasting di Indonesia, Pak? Dan apakah ada yang mulai digital broadcasting ini selain di RRI, Pak? Kira-kira mohon arahannya, Pak.
Saya bantu jawab, Pak Ismail sedang ada keperluan. Jadi radio komunitas di Indonesia itu diatur di PP 51 tahun 2005 itu dibatasi low power IRP 50 watt, Pak. 50 watt dengan jangkauan 2,5 km. Jadi itu memang sangat lokal. Misalnya kelompok tani gitu, salah satu bentuknya, atau misalnya sekolah yang menyelenggarakan pendidikan, itu juga bisa jadi LPK. Jadi radio komunitas ini dia sifatnya spot-spot gitu, Pak.
Oh, tapi harus izin Pak, Pak. Jadi contohnya
Tetap
gini,
harus izin.
di COVID ini kan ada di lingkungan saya itu ada sekolah yang SD sama mereka mungkin dengan DRM ini, tapi saya nggak tahu juga karena DRM kan harganya lumayan mahal Pak untuk broadcastingnya. Harus izin atau gimana Pak?
Selama dia bersiaran di terestrial itu pasti harus izin tetap, Pak.
Oh, oke, Pak. Oke. Izin kalau misalkan saya di daerah Bandung, misal harus izin ke mana, Pak?
Izinnya ke Kominfo, Pak.
Oh, Kominfo. Maksudnya gini, Pak, ini kan benar-benar baru, jadi kita pingin start untuk misalkan komunitas, kemudian kita support juga di Telkom, support juga untuk beberapa untuk RRI misalkan ya. Kalau misalkan nanti kita akan gini kan based on pengalaman, based on kalau ada komunitasnya kan untuk belajar bersama tentang digital kan lebih bagus ya Pak ya. Jadi kita bisa mencoba misalkan ada komunitas digital, walaupun ya nanti kita coba lihat apakah memang memungkinkan nggak. Jadi untuk mensupport membuat inisiatif misalkan nanti untuk pembelajaran yang Alex tadi terangkan. Contohnya kita bisa belajar daring dengan menggunakan radio, kemudian ada teks dan ada something yang bisa dikembangkan lagi, tapi yang mengembangkan komunitas mungkin Pak. Ya pinginnya seperti itu cita-citanya, tapi nggak tahu Pak Benny ya. Kira-kira kalau memungkinkan ada aturannya, ada regulasinya, kita akan coba misalkan gitu di lokal kita dahulu.
Baik Pak, kalau untuk komunitas ya, maksudnya komunitas dalam arti komunitas yang untuk digitalnya, itu sebenarnya itu kan istilahnya perkumpulan biasa gitu Pak ya. Tapi ketika dia bersiaran memang berurusan izin. Jadi yang tadi saya jelaskan bahwa emang komunitas itu harus berizin, itu terkait dengan kalau dia bersiaran. Jadi kalau misalnya komunitas yang misal kayak di TV digital tuh ada Pak, komunitas pecinta TV digital, pengguna set-top box itu ada. Itu biasa aja itu kayak grup-grup biasa.
Oke, siap Pak. Oke, jadi sekedar
kalau nanti dari misalnya Telkom ada usulan mau pilot project misalnya untuk radio schooling pakai digital ini, nanti bisa disampaikan ke Menteri dulu aja Pak.
Oke, sip Pak Alex. Jadi Pak Benny. Jadi ada kemungkinan yes, Alex, we just sharing about the community broadcasting under regulation from the Kominfo. We can have learning and explore about digital radio in community, local community in here. But let's see, is it possible or not? Just imagine we can have group in local here to explore about the digital radio, because this is the just starting in Indonesia, I think.
Mm-hmm. A very good idea. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Please continue.
Can we go to sort of last questions, so to speak?
Silakan yang ada mau bertanya kembali.
Any more burning question?
Tadi dari PRSNI sudah ada pertanyaan, apakah dari JRKI, Lembaga Penyiaran Komunitas, ada yang mau disampaikan, ditanyakan? Silakan.
Benny, what was the question?
No, it was a request for questions. Okay, Then, if there's no other burning questions at this moment, thank you so much for inviting us, Pak Ismail, Benny, and Danny, and everybody at Kominfo, and of course all of you participants for sharing your time and sticking to the very end. I hope it was useful information for you, and I hope that this will be the starting point of a very, very successful digital radio migration project in Indonesia.
Thank you very much. We'll make the presentation available to probably to Kominfo so they can distribute. You know us. Please go to drm.org, be in touch with all of us, join us, and lobby hard for DRM.
Subscribe to the monthly newsletter with all the latest news on DRM if you are interested.
It's all free. Handbook, newsletter, contacting us, it's all free. We are at your disposal. Thank you once again to Pak Ismail, to Danny, Pak Benny, to Sharad and Alex. Thank you very much to all of you. And it's sunny now in London, so if we stay long enough, it gets sunny. Okay.
Thank you, Ruxandra.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Alex from DRM Consortium. It's about to sunset here. So we have. So I
it's
think
a bit warmer probably than here.
Yes, I think we can wrap the session for today. Thank you for.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for your cooperation for attending and hosting this webinar. If there is a request to host the second session about this, feel free to ask to us. Maybe we can schedule it further. That being said, thank you for everyone and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. And
thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.